So, who knows who Octavia Butler is? See, I love y'all. All right. So I really appreciated the point that that Kenyon made around the the ideas of alternative ideas around what gods or sort of spiritual practices that shape our lives and lead us forward is. And I think many folks have probably, if you've read Octavia, you've probably read Parable of the Sower, right? Which includes a book. In it, the main character is writing a book that is, in some ways a religious book. It is a political book. It's a radical book called Earthseed, Book of the Living. And so I just wanted to share one of those affirmations around different ideas of what God can be for us, right? And I think all of Octavia's main characters are women of color. I think most of them are black women. Octavia was like, no, I'm not gonna write a white man. Y'all got that. I'm gonna do something exciting for me. So, God is power, infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent. And yet God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped. God is change. And I think that idea of change, that idea of a higher purpose that is about change and our ability to shape it, our willingness to admit it, and our ability to shape it and to dream it and to bring it into being is the foundation of our anthology, Octavias Brood, which is named in honor of Octavia Butler. And so just a little bit about me. I'm a proud nerd from birth. I grew up, my first memory is watching Star Trek, y'all. I speak a little bit of Klingonese here and there, Used to be fluent, but not a lot of call for it. So, I grew up really living in these fantasy worlds, most of them created by white men. And I was lucky enough to find Octavia Butler when I was still in high school, but by and large, they were these fantastical worlds where, I didn't exist, or if I existed, I was a monster, a disposable character. I was really a prop, right? Not a piece of the scenery, not an actual human being. And so when I began getting involved with political organizing in high school and into college, I was like, I'm a serious radical, I'm a serious revolutionary. I don't have time for the silliness, these made-up worlds. I'm gonna put that away, and I'm gonna focus on being serious, right? Serious. I was lucky enough to be able to come full circle and find a community, one of them being my co-editor, Adrienne Marie Brown, but many other people who, were like, boo-boo, you can have both. You can be serious, and you can also have these fantastical worlds. And even more, you can be in charge of shaping those fantastical worlds in our own image, right? And I think that is the real power to us of science fiction, and that's why we felt that this anthology was so incredibly important. The science fiction in the anthology are original stories written by organizers, by activists, by change makers, by visionaries. And that was very important for us to put the folks who are doing organizing work, who are re-envisioning the world we live in every single day, in this context where they can take the issues they're working on and be given free rein to explore them, as fully and as deeply as possible. So we have folks talking about issues like criminal justice, environmental justice, immigration, war, gentrification, religion, corporate control, race, gender, sexual identity, disability, power, community, religion, right? Everything. And often everything interwoven together in stories, because that's the life we lead, right? As Audre Lorde said, there are no single issues because we do not lead single issue lives, right? And so, so for us, we thought there was nothing better than putting organizers in this position of writing science fiction, which we actually came up with the term visionary fiction to kind of separate it from that mainstream dominant paradigm, white man saving the world, and we're all cowering in the corner like, stop the asteroid or the aliens or, whatever's coming, to separate it from that, to really, and we came up with some principles around that. Really the focus of it is that, visionary fiction is not neutral and does not purport to be neutral. The goal of visionary fiction is to create social change. And, so I'm, and I'm also happy to nerd out all day long with y'all later if you want and talk about critiques of mainstream sci-fi and places where we can subvert it. But, so we really wanted to come up with this idea of visionary fiction to set it apart, and also so we didn't have to argue about, well, there's not enough scientific basis in here for this to be science fiction. It's more speculative fiction or maybe magical realism, because those are my people, y'all, and we can argue about that all day long. So we're like, it's all one, y'all, visionary fiction. Because we really believe that actually all organizing is science fiction, right? All organizing is science fiction, and every single organizer and change maker and visionary is a science fiction creator. Because when we say we're working towards a world without prisons, a world without poverty, a world, where everyone has access to getting their basic needs met, has full freedom to be their full selves, that's science fiction. I mean, maybe y'all came from a different planet and saw it, but, right? Right now, I'm guessing none of us have seen that world. But we feel that the ability to dream these concrete visions together, collectively, gives us a goal to move forward together. And we can begin to work to build the path towards those, not one new world, but many new worlds. Because I think we often get in this trap of, the scarcity model. Well, what's the one right answer? What's the one right way? I think one of the amazing things about science fiction is it's infinite planets, right? Infinite diversity and infinite combinations, which is the Vulcan, philosophy from Star Trek, just whatever. But, the idea that, there are as many ways of doing this, of creating these new worlds, as there are people in the room. We don't all have to agree. We just have to figure out ways to ensure that our visions are sort of a shared liberatory vision. And so, so for us, we felt like one thing that I think radical movements, social justice movements are really good at is critiquing, right? I think that we can really critique, and that's absolutely important. I love me a good critique, I love a break it down, right? But I think one thing that's really hard for us to do is to imagine alternatives. And I think I think that there have been conversations about that this whole time of, yes, we can critique the politics of respectability, which some of us call the politics of assimilation. We can critique that, but what do we have to offer in contrast? And I think one of the important things about science fiction or visionary fiction is it allows us to imagine complete systemic transformation and change that is often very hard for us to think about. And I think one example that's really useful is around prisons and the prison industrial complex, which Kenyon talked about a little bit, right? And so folks, I'm sure, I'm guessing most of us are not pro-prison industrial complex. I'm going to assume that, right? I'm going to assume, okay, all right. Just say yes. But then the question becomes, well, what's the alternative, right? And I think when we're talking about prison abolition, the vast majority of folks have never seen that, right? I mean, to the vast majority of us, prison abolition is science fiction. But science fiction is a testing ground, right? That's, my co-editor, Adrienne Marie Brown, says that science fiction is the perfect testing ground for us to begin to say, well, what would this look like on the ground? So now harm has been done in the community, and what happens next, right? And to really be able to look at the ways that has already manifested in science fiction, as well as collectively get together and write our own science fiction. One of the things we've been doing with the books is facilitating collective writing together in science fiction, to be able to talk about dreaming, within organizations, so that it's not just our own individual. I know a lot of times it's the writer with their keyboard by themselves. I guess no one uses pen and paper anymore, but but really, how do we as organizations, as communities, dream together? And so, I think that's the really important piece. And for me, I offer visionary fiction to y'all not as an answer, but as a process, right? I don't think that all of us being nerds and wearing Star Trek uniforms or Doctor Who scarves is going to, change the world. But I think what is useful is this process of visionary, fantastical, dreaming new worlds together. And I think that it is to me, one of the few processes that allows us to really challenge that entire idea of the politics of respectability, or the politics of assimilation, right? Because the idea of the politics of assimilation is we want access to an oppressive system, right? We want neo-colonial power within that system. We want to have enough power that we can enact oppression upon other folks and lessen our own oppression, right? So rather than saying, well, how do we reform that concept, visionary fiction allows us to say, we don't even need to engage with that concept. We're going to go to an entirely different planet. We're going to go to an entirely different time period, a different universe, and start from scratch, right? So we're just going to build it up, from the bottom. And, I think Parable of the Sower offers us, and Parable of the Talents, which is the sequel that Octavia Butler wrote, offers us visions of what could society look like when we say that, when we center those folks who have been marginalized, when we center those folks whose intersecting identities actually make them the experts about survival outside of a system, and we take guidance and leadership from folks like that. And I think the really useful thing that Octavia gives us is it's not perfect, right? I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, that part, I don't know about that part. And Octavia, that's one of the things about her. She was real. She's like, we're not going to create something perfect. We're going to create something flawed and hopefully better, and continue the eternal process of growing it and making it even stronger. And I think that is what is incredibly useful about the idea of visionary fiction, because visionary fiction allows us, again, to center those folks who have been marginalized, and really to create the space to recognize and honor that ability to live outside of acceptable systems, right? Outside of the politics of assimilation and the politics of respectability, and center them as leaders for creating these new worlds and these new communities. And so queer Black DJ scholar Lene Denise has a quote where she talks about a whole new understanding of the unique place Black trans folks occupy, a day of remembrance, holding light to the shapeshifters among us, right? Which I think is an incredibly powerful idea. And again, this idea to change and to shift and to grow is something that we need to all internalize, because again, the goal is not just about inclusion. The goal is about complete transformation and completely shifting the frame. So one of our stories in Octavias Brood, called Hollow by Mia Mingus, takes place on a planet where folks who are called the unperfects, folks who are dealing with different physical abilities, folks who are using canes, who have wheelchairs, they have been put by the perfects, right, to die on this planet. And instead, what they do is create an incredible society that is centered around them, that is not about, disability equality or disability justice. They are empowered and liberated, right? They are operating in a sphere of total liberation. And I think that's what is incredibly important, that, we talk about decolonization processes. I think that, the decolonization of our imagination is probably the most subversive and dangerous decolonization process, right? Because I think that forms the foundation for us to continue all of those other decolonization processes. But we cannot decolonize if we cannot even imagine there exists anything outside of the colonial structures in which we were raised, in which we live, right? And so I think that, again, that visionary fiction offers us a process to begin to ask ourselves, what would total liberation look like, right? Because I think what's also very important is to recognize not only is everyone who engages in social change a sci-fi creator, but I think it's important to recognize that everyone who comes from a historic background of oppression and trauma is walking science fiction, right? Every single one of us in this room is walking science fiction. So someone dreamed you up and then bent the universe and changed reality to create you, right? And both Adrienne and myself, are Black women. And so for us, we think of our enslaved, Black ancestors in chains. In the 1850s or, early 1860s, after the Fugitive Slave Act is passed, having no reason to believe that, that liberation was possible. they still dreamed that liberation. They did it. They made it work. We exist because of them. We are their science fiction legacy, and we, in turn, have a science fiction responsibility to the next generations who are coming to continue dreaming collectively, and then doing the hard and precious and incredible work of making those dreams reality. And so I just want to end with one more Earthseed verse, which anyone who knows Octavia, feel free to recite along with me, right? All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Thank y'all.